Hi guys, welcome back to a page in a chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and today we are going through all of the books that I read in September. September was a really strong reading month for me. It felt like the month of September was incredibly long but also incredibly short at the same time. I'm not really sure how that works, but I feel like I managed to read a lot even though I don't remember reading much. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that I read I think 11 books in the month of September, so it was a very strong reading month, and I ended up putting my Goodreads reading challenge goal up from 70 to 100 because just the rate that I'm reading, I'm really getting through the books and I am well on track to hit 100 books this year. So today I'm going to be going through all of the books that I read in the month of September. There is a real mix of cozy fantasies and romance books in this wrap up, so hopefully there is something interesting for you to hear about or want to know about. If you guys like seeing wrap ups and this sort of like classic booktubey content, then do please feel free to hit that bigger subscribe button down below and give me a thumbs up so I know you like it. I upload videos every single Wednesday and every single Sunday, so there's no shortage of TBRs and wrap ups and that classic booktube content if you are looking for it. And so because I think I might be here talking about these books for quite a while because there's quite a few of them, let's just get on. I don't remember which way it goes, but let's just get on into the books I read in September. So the first books that I'm going to talk to you about are two books in a series that I was very committed to getting read in the month of September, and those books were Gleam and Glow by Raven Kennedy, books 3 and 4 in the Plated Prisoners series. I don't really know what I expected from the Plated Prisoners series, but my thoughts on these books are interesting. Up until book 4, I had a fairly positive attitude towards these books. I felt like my ratings were gradually increasing with each book. I felt like I was getting the types of content that I wanted more frequently as each book went on. I felt like the writing got better. The character development in these books is really impressive. I haven't said this, but this is a romantasy series that is a King Midas retelling, and we follow our main character Auron as she navigates this world of King Midas and being his like special like gilded person, and it is a fantasy romance series following kind of that theme or general idea, and I did feel like these books did get better. And I left the third one really excited. I thought the ending of the third book was really enjoyable. For most of the third book we'd been in a setting that I wasn't particularly happy about, and I was really excited to go into the fourth book and finally be free of that setting and be having some fun with it. And then I think the fourth book was the worst of the lot. I hated it so much. It was like over 700 pages book, and it went on for entirely too long, and nothing actually went to further the story until right at the very end of the book, and I didn't like the twist that took. When I vlogged my experience of reading book 4 in the Plated Prisoner series, I said that I would probably continue with this series because I've come so far, so why not? But as more time passes, I really don't think I will be buying book 5 or reading book 5 because book 4 just killed all of my enthusiasm and motivation for this series. It did not need to be that long, which is such a shame because I love the idea of a King Midas retelling, and I really love what Raven Kennedy did with this idea for a King Midas retelling. I thought it was really fun and really unique, but the execution was not quite there for me. I just found all of the books too long. I wish that I had enjoyed the last two books in this series more. To be honest, books 2 and 3 were probably the highlight of this series, but I wouldn't even necessarily say highlight. Like, I was really hoping that book 4 would be where it finally like stepped up and I like finally had like a really good like book in the series that I could rave about, because it had just been gradually getting so much better. But I don't feel like there was any book in this series that really stood out as being amazing. I don't know what I'm gonna feel in the future. Maybe I'll want to come back to it, but as it stands at this point in time when I'm filming this video, pretty sure that I will not be continuing with the Plated Prisoner series because book 4 angered me so much in its length and its lack of actual like worthwhile content. Another book that I read in the month of September September was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. I have had this book on my physical TBR since February. I purchased it in the US, as you can probably tell by the super floppy and like big bind up that I have. This follows our main character Audrey, I believe, and she is a young girl in Victorian England, and she wants to learn to be a pathologist or a forensic pathologist like her uncle, but she's living in a world where this is very much not acceptable like behavior or an acceptable education for a young girl of her station. So she very much has to sneak around in secret, sneak around behind her father's back, attend classes dressed as a man, and she is a very feminist, forward-thinking character that I think a lot of people would enjoy. And so this book takes place when Jack the Ripper is out and about killing people, and it follows Audrey and one of her classmates Thomas as they work with Audrey's uncle to try to get to the bottom of who Jack the Ripper is. I found this to be an interesting book for a YA. I wasn't completely taken with it for a good chunk of the book. It took me a long while to warm up to it, to really get into it, to really get going. But once I did, about halfway through the book I would say, then I did find it really interesting. I loved the interpretation of everything that happened with Jack the Ripper. I really enjoyed like the twist. I wouldn't say it was the most brilliant plot twist in the world, but for a YA it was very impressive. I definitely got the murderer wrong, but then it wasn't completely out of nowhere. I think a lot of people would read this and probably get the murderer right, but I am just an idiot and this isn't a genre that I typically read. But I did really enjoy this. I think I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. I couldn't really complain for a young adult. I have been drifting away from the young adult genre for quite a while now, but it was nice to delve back into it, and I definitely will continue with this series. The next one takes place in Romania as we hunt for Dracula, and it continues to follow Audrey and Thomas in that quest, and I'm particularly interested in the Dracula one because I just don't know where that could go when Dracula's like a fictional creature. Like, at least Jack the Ripper was real. So very intrigued by the next book, and I will probably be continuing with this series. Not like an all-time favourite, but was an enjoyable little read. The atmosphere was really nice for the September month as it started to get colder, so I really can't complain too much with this one. And then just to finish up with the ebooks that I read in the month of September, I did a reading KU sports romances video in which I read Forbidden Devil and then Play Fake and Delay of Game by Maggie Rawdon. So I will link that video so you can see my full in-depth thoughts as I was reading the books. But just to give you a quick little roundup on how I felt about these KU sports romances. Forbidden Devil was a second chance hockey romance following a main character. She inherits her dad's hockey team, and then her ex-boyfriend happens to be the star of that hockey team, and so she has to manage the team and kind of work with him as they start to reconnect. I thought that the tension between these two was quite well thought out. Like, the reason that they couldn't just jump into bed with each other or be together was quite a smart reason, but ultimately this book let itself down in the last 50% of this book because I felt like it relied too much on just telling us that these two characters have had a relationship in the past. We didn't get to see any of it on page, and we didn't really get to see any romance or relationship development between these two on page, only smut scenes. And so I felt like I couldn't really root for these two characters because it had just told me that they had a connection and that they'd been together in the past, but it hadn't shown me any of that. And then my other thoughts on this book are spoilery, so they are in that vlog with a spoiler warning up if you would like to see them, but I'm probably not going to share them in a spoiler-free wrap-up. And then for that video I also read Play Fake and Delay of Game by Maggie Rawdon. These are the first two books in her football series. I loved these. I gave both of these books 4 stars. I loved both of them. Maggie Rawdon is now like a new favourite romance author for me. What I particularly loved about both of these books is that the tropes in them were very deliberate and really played a strong role in the story. The tropes weren't just thrown in to get downloads on KU or just advertise it as this is fake dating or this is friends to lovers. Were very, very intrinsic and necessary to the story that she was trying to tell, and I really, really enjoyed that. And this is one of the very few friends to lovers in Delay of Game that I have ever enjoyed. Do with that information what you will, but I loved these. Play Fake is a fake dating and then Delay of Game is Friends to Lovers, as I've already said, and I'm super excited to read the third one. I cannot wait for it. And so yeah. And then another book I read in the month of September is A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. I really enjoyed this book as well. Honestly, September had some really great reads. I believe I also gave this one 4 stars, but do bear in mind that fake dating is my favourite trope of all time, so that could have played a part. But this follows our main character, Marielle, and she is prophesied to be a super powerful witch, but she can't really seem to get a hold of magic. Like, that prophecy doesn't seem to be coming true. Everything seems to blow up in her face and go wrong, and one day while she is trying to cast a spell, she accidentally summons a demon, but this demon then cannot leave until she makes a deal with him, and she doesn't want to make a deal with him because she doesn't want to give up her soul. And so they are forced to fake date because there's no other explanation for why he's living in her house and constantly around her. And the premise of this book is adorable. Also, the cast of characters is very sweet. It is a very small town romance vibes. If you enjoyed the X-Hex, then this is definitely a fun one to check out as well, because it has that similar small town magical community and following witches in a similar fashion. What really stood out to me about this book is that the author really weaves some intricate plot lines as to why these two dislike each other in the beginning or kind of can't be together. Like, he is there to make a deal to obtain her soul and she doesn't want to give him her soul, and that's kind of a difficult situation to write yourself out of, and I think the author does a really good job of answering those questions and sorting out that plot line and having it all wrap up very nicely. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It is a perfect witchy rom-com for this spooky season and I 110% recommend it. I would then like to discuss Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. I read this for a reading vlog, so you would have also seen my thoughts on this one, but I didn't love it. I've just really grown out of young adult, and reading young adult contemporaries like really shows how much I've grown out of young adult, like particularly for contemporary slash romances. I can still kind of back them for fantasies. I think they're still super fun in that genre and I can get behind them, but I'm so used to reading adult romances now that the young adults just really don't hit, and they really feel quite superficial and like surface level emotion, which makes sense because they're teenagers, but I just don't enjoy it as much. But for anyone who does like young adult, then I think this is a pretty good example, and I do believe this is Talia Hibbert's first young adult or only young adult. I'd read her Brown Sisters trilogy before, so I had fairly high hopes for this going in, and writing wise and idea wise and setup wise and structural wise I had no issues with it. It's literally just that I have grown out of young adult writing. But this follows our main characters Celine and Brad, and they are academic rivals to lovers trope E in this book. They go to the same school and they both want to study law at going to university. In order to boost their chances of getting into a good law school or being able to afford to go to law school, they take part in what is essentially a Duke of Edinburgh award. Like, they have to go and do a hike to practice all of these skills that will be really beneficial to them in the workplace. So it's basically a Duke of Edinburgh award, which is something we have in this country revolving around school students and hiking and improving chances of getting into university, even though it doesn't really. And in this book it's just Duke of Edinburgh, but if it actually made a difference or mattered. My lights have gone off. I thought it was looking a bit dark in here for a second. So I think the character development in this book is fantastic. It is very Talia Hibbert in nature, and if I had read this as a 16-17-year-old I probably would have loved it, because applying to university and deciding your future is very all-encompassing at that time, and it really does feel like the be-all and end-all, and you really feel like the decisions you make then have a huge bearing on the outcome of your life, and they do in a sense. But now that I've kind of gone through the entire academic system and you know, I've completely changed the direction of how things are gonna go. You know, it was a little bit eye-rolly for me because I'm so beyond the point in time that these characters are at. But if I had read this at this time I would have absolutely adored it. So I would definitely recommend this for older teenagers who are in the university application stage, and if you like young adult then I think you would find this really cute and wonderful. It just wasn't necessarily for me anymore. The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This was such a fun little hexy, witchy rom-com to read whilst I was in Cornwall in September. It really hit the vibe perfectly. I kind of planned my entire autumn TBR around the Ex-Hex and those types of books, so I was really happy to find that I liked this book, otherwise we were going to be in trouble for the rest of the books that I bought and put on my TBR. This book follows our main character Vivian, and when Reese breaks her heart when she is 19 years old, she places a curse on him because she gets drunk and drinks a load of vodka and decides to curse him. Only Reese is one of the descendants of the founder of the little witchy Gilmore Girls village that these characters live in, and he has to come back to town when these characters are much older and kind of renew the magic in the ley lines of the town, except when he goes to do that, the curse that Vivi has placed on him transfers to the ley lines and sends the magic in the town all out of whack. So these two have to work together to solve the curse that she has placed on him and help the town so that the magic isn't going absolutely haywire anymore. Whilst I think the romance in this is very cute, it is very light-hearted and very adorable and kind of a very, very fun read. Like, if you're looking for a rom-com, then this definitely has that light-hearted element that you really would be looking for. It feels very much like a movie rom-com in book form, and I would definitely recommend it for that. But to me, what really makes this book is just the vibe and the atmosphere of this setting. It really feels like autumn and Halloween. It's like if you mixed Halloween Town and Gilmore Girls and just set a book there, and I think it really comes across well in the writing and makes for a very atmospheric read, and that's kind of why I love this and why I really wanted to reread it this year and kind of plan my whole TBR around it, because I originally read this in audiobook form and DNF'd it because the romance really wasn't hitting for me in the audiobook form, but I love the atmosphere and the setting so much that I decided to buy a physical copy this year and give it another go, and I'm very happy that I did that. I also plan on reading the sequel to this book, The Kiss Curse, in October as well, just because the vibes are so perfect that I cannot pass up on them. So super happy that I enjoyed this, and I can see why it was all over Bookstagram this time last year. It is a really fun read, and if you haven't read it yet and you really want like a witchy, light-hearted rom-com with Gilmore Girls / Halloween Town setting vibes, then this is definitely the book for you, and you should 110% check it out, as well as A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, because this has some similar tropes and themes and vibes just generally, and if you like one then you're probably gonna like the other, so definitely recommend. And then to take a little turn into some YA cozy fantasy vibes, we have The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. I completely forgot that I owned this book, which is why you will not have seen it on any of my autumnal TBRs, because I just completely forgot that I owned it. But the joy of doing random number generating TBR challenges is that you find books that you completely forgot were on your TBR, and this was one of those times. So this is a YA fantasy that follows our main character Rin, and she is a grave digger, so she digs the graves for people to be buried in, and that's how she makes her living in this tiny small village with her family. Except there's beginning to be a lot of superstition surrounding the dead, which means that people are being cremated instead, and she is not earning any money, and her family are really struggling to get by. And then a map maker called Ellis comes to town, and things start to get a little bit weird. Any of the dead that were buried are then like resurrecting and are trying to kill people or cause problems and are invading this small little village, and it is these kind of resurrected bodies that are called the Bone Houses. And so Rin and Ellis go on an adventure, like quest together, to try to get to the bottom of why these bone houses are being brought to life, why they are so angry and being so vengeful, and it forces them to deal with a lot of feelings about death. What I particularly liked about this book was that I think sometimes in books like this, death can really be the villain of the story, and especially when the bone houses are kind of the villains here, it would have been very easy to go by that route. But I think the presentation of death was very nuanced and very well handled, and I really think that is important for young adults to read as well as just interesting for me to read. The only thing that maybe slightly hindered my enjoyment of this book is that whilst there is a romance element, it is very, very subtle, and just on a personal front I would have preferred for it to be slightly more center or more developed. But all in all, my feelings for this one are overall positive. It was kind of just a fine reading experience. I enjoyed it. It was nothing to write home about. Again, if you are really into young adult fantasy, then I think this is a really great example and you would really enjoy it. It just felt a little bit bland for me. Like, it was just very like quest driven. There's plenty of young adult fantasies that I read and sometimes I question why they're young adult, because the writing style and the way that the story is constructed and the research and things that have gone into these books really feels like it could be an adult book. It just blows me away sometimes, the worlds that people are able to create. This one just felt a little bit on the blander side of just the dead are coming back to life, let's watch them go on a quest. But all in all, it was pretty enjoyable. I think I'm just being quite nitpicky at the moment. And then a book that I am super excited to talk to you about, which is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I adored this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was a blow me away kind of experience. I ended up tabbing the book, which I don't actually know if you can see right now. I literally just found this to be the cutest, most wholesome, most heartwarming story in the entire world. It follows our main character Mika, and she belongs to a secret society of witches, because witches are secret in this world. It takes place in the modern world, and she is enlisted through kind of Instagram or TikTok or some kind of video sharing thing. She is enlisted to go to this secret manor and teach these 3 young girls how to control their magic. And when she gets there, there is a very wholesome, sweet, close-knit family dynamic, and then there is a very cozy romance with a librarian who is also one of the teachers at this school. It feels very similar in tone to House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, but personally I did prefer this one. I just felt like it had all of those similar cozy fantasy elements, but even cozier somehow. And the found family is just one of my favourite tropes anyway, so I adored seeing it in this setting. And I can't really share too much of why I love this or the quotes that I loved without spoiling a lot of the book, but it was just so incredibly low stakes and wholesome, and it really just felt like a warm hug on a cozy autumn day, and I could not recommend this book enough. Like, you have to go and read it right now. And then the final book that I read in September, or will have read in September, is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I love this edition. It's the only reason why I was even tempted to pick this book up, because this is a Barnes & Noble edition, which I found at TK Maxx, and it's very floppy, and I thought that the fact that I could like open it properly and it's got quite large pages would make the actual reading experience of this better, and I will say that it did. I have only ever enjoyed Gothic classics in the past, and this was no different really. I got really into this book for a time. I wanted to go back and annotate it, highlight it, write all my notes in the corner. It's been a long time since I've read a classic, and it's like got my brain in gear and like ready to analyze, and I really enjoyed that. But in the last 100 pages of this book, it has completely lost me. I am so bored. I'm not interested in the story at all. I feel like it's really not capturing my attention anymore. So I am on page 306, so I've got like 20 pages left of this to read, which I will obviously finish tonight, and will have read this by the time September is over, so I'm going to be including it in this wrap up. Obviously I don't think it's gonna turn around in the next 20 pages or so, but as far as my experience with classics goes, this has been a pretty good one, and I would maybe give this 3.5 stars, because for a while there I was really into it, and I probably would have given it 4 stars. I feel like once the story turned to following more like Kathy and Linton, I lost all interest, and there were multiple times when I, like in the last half of this book, where I had to look up the family tree because I just felt so completely lost and nothing was being properly explained. So, you know, it's the best experience I've had with a classic in recent years, but it definitely has not turned me into a classics reader. It hasn't really changed my mind about how I feel about classics, but I'm still really proud of myself for reading it, and I do think the vibes were pretty perfect for autumn. I was reading this on a really grey, dreary day on the beach in Cornwall, and it just slapped. So I can see why people do love this book. Personally, it does not hold a candle to Frankenstein or Dracula for me. I still think those are so much more engaging, even for classics. I don't know why this one would be your favourite gothic, because I think there's better gothics, but I did enjoy this more than I've enjoyed other classics recently, and yeah, I'm really happy that I went into it with an open mind. I went into it pretty excited to read it because I had this new edition. I think if I'd stopped reading at the 200 page mark or so, this would have been a 4-star. I just have gotten so bored in the last 100 pages of this book, which is a real shame, but what can one do? It is what it is. I wish it could have been a slightly better experience because I really wanted to love this, but unfortunately I did not. And whilst I can't show you the ebooks that I read, here are all of the physical books that I read in the month of September. It was a really strong month of reading. I think getting back into BookTube and posting on BookTube really helped boost my reading rates, and obviously my master's dissertation was submitted and I suddenly had so much time on my hands, so this will probably be the best month of reading that I'll have for a while. But I hope that you enjoyed hearing about these books, hearing what I thought of these books. Most of them I did talk about in vlogs, so I hope it wasn't too repetitive. If you guys have thoughts on any of these books, then please let me know down below and we can have a chat about some books. It is what I love to do most. I'm never bored or tired of talking about books, so please feel free to do that. If you guys enjoyed this video and you would like to see more from me, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I upload every single Wednesday and every single Sunday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. Also, do please feel free to check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Page in Chapter, so that you can see what I'm reading and how I'm reviewing it in real time, and you don't have to wait for the monthly updates because it will all be there in reviews on my feed and in my stories and things like that. So if you want even more content, which would just be amazing if you did, then please feel free to go and follow me over on there. And I have been rambling at you for quite a while now, so without further ado, I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you are enjoying everything you are reading, and there are no reading slumps in your future. And I will see you for my next video. Bye guys.